that maybe they were still within signal range. But as the sun dipped lower, every call went straight to voicemail on the first ring. It was as if all 3 phones had suddenly been switched off. 4 had died at the same time. That was the moment a quiet, cold fear began to creep in. By nightfall, the easy explanations no longer felt possible. Parents began calling neighbors, friends, anyone who might have seen them. When nobody had, they contacted the authorities. The first search teams arrived quickly, knowing that once the mountain was swallowed by darkness, finding anyone would become far more difficult. The air turned cooler, and the forest, which seemed inviting during the day, now looked endless and shadowed, with only the moon lighting the trails. Searchers started at the trailhead, shining flashlights along the narrow paths and calling out the teens' names, their voices echoing off the canyon walls. Each time the calls went unanswered, the silence grew heavier. There was no sound of footsteps approaching, no rustling in the trees that might mean someone was coming. Only the wind moved through the branches, and in the distance, the soft trickle of a creek seemed almost mocking in its calmness. Helicopters were brought in, their searchlights cutting across the dark mountains like white blades. From the air, they scanned for any sign movement, a figure waving, even a piece of bright clothing. But the forest canopy was thick, and the beams of light could only penetrate so far. On the ground, volunteers spread out in small groups, marking each area they covered with ribbons tied to tree branches, a system to ensure no path went unchecked. Hour after hour, the search continued, but nothing changed. There were no footprints in the dusty trail beyond a certain point. No water bottles left behind, no jackets dropped, no scuff marks on rocks that might suggest someone had slipped. It was as though the 3 friends had reached a certain bend in the trail and vanished into thin air. That thought, unspoken at first, began to take root. They carried food, blankets, and extra gear, determined to keep searching until there was an answer. Dogs trained to track human scent were brought in, their noses pressed low to the ground as they zigzagged along the paths. For a few moments, hope would flare each time a dog seemed to pick up something. Point of painful mystery. If they had reached it, why had they not continued down the obvious path? And if they had left the trail, where could they possibly have gone? The terrain beyond was steep, rocky, and dangerous. Even the most experienced hikers wouldn't wander far off there, not without a reason. By the 3rd day, exhaustion began to settle over everyone. Parents refused to rest, their eyes red from sleepless nights, but the search was wearing down even the strongest volunteers. Helicopters had combed the area multiple times. Every creek had been checked, every hidden meadow scanned. Still, there was nothing, no clothing snagged on branches, no broken twigs that might hint at movement, not even a shoe print in the soft mud after a brief rainstorm. It was this absence of evidence that frightened people the most. In most missing hiker cases, even if a person isn't found right away, there are clues, something to suggest where they went or what happened. Here it was different. The mountains seemed untouched, as if the 3 teenagers had never walked became harder to ignore. Still, they refused to give in to the idea that this was the end. They promised themselves that no matter how much time passed, they would keep searching. Weeks turned into months, and the seasons changed. The mountains that had been warm and green in summer turned cold and white in winter. Snow covered the trails, hiding any evidence that might have been left behind. Yet even in the bitter cold, the families went up there walking the same paths the search teams had walked, scanning the ground for any tiny clue. Sometimes they would stop and call out the teens' names into the stillness, listening for an answer they knew might never come. By the first anniversary, hope had taken on a new shape. It was no longer about finding them the next day, it was about believing that someday, somehow, the truth would be revealed. On that day, the families and friends gathered at the trailhead, holding pictures of the smiling teenagers. They shared stories about their laughter, their dreams, and the silly little things they used to do. Some people cried openly, others stood silent. Their grief too deep for words. Each year, they organized a memorial hike. Dozens of people from the community joined, walking together along the same trail where the friends had last been seen. They carried flowers, leaving them at certain spots as a way of saying, "We haven't forgotten you." It became a tradition, but also a painful reminder that the trail still kept its secret. Flyers became a permanent part of the town's scenery. They were taped to shop windows, pinned to bulletin boards, and hung in the post office. Even when they faded from the sun or tore from the wind, the families replaced them. The pictures of the three smiling teenagers stared out at passersby year after year, silent plea for anyone who might know something to come forward. Social media became another battlefield for hope. The families posted updates, old photos, and heartfelt messages. Sometimes strangers from other states would share the posts, helping spread the story far beyond Colorado. Every time a post went viral, there was a surge of hope maybe this would reach the one person who had the answers. But the days would pass, and the inboxes would remain empty of anything useful. The small mountain town learned to live with the mystery, but it was always there, just under the surface. Parents would still pause when they saw a group of teenagers laughing together in the park, imagining their own children among them. Teachers would sometimes slip into silence when talking about past school years, remembering the empty desks. Even the local diner kept 3 favorite milkshakes on the menu, the ones the teens always ordered, though nobody had asked for them in years. For the families, normal life was impossible. Every birthday was a reminder of what had been stolen from them. They would imagine what the teenagers would look like now, older, taller, maybe with different hairstyles or new dreams. Some parents kept their bedrooms exactly the same, as if their children might walk back in one day and pick up where they left off. Others couldn't bear the sight and kept the doors closed, sealing away the memories like a fragile treasure. Some of the teens' closest friends found it hard to go hiking anymore. Passing the trailhead felt like being punched in the chest. They remembered the laughter, the inside jokes, the plans for the future that had been cut short. Some moved away, thinking distance would make it easier, but grief has a way of traveling with you. Every now and then, rumors would surface. A hiker thought they saw someone matching the description far away in another state. A camper claimed to have heard voices in a remote part of the mountain. Each time, the family's hopes would spike, and search teams would check it out. Each time it led to was about to be uncovered. It was a crisp spring morning in 2024, and the town had long grown used to the quiet absence of answers. Life had gone on, though never the same. And the hiking trail where the three teenagers had vanished was now just another part of the scenery passed by, but rarely spoken of. For the workers, it was just another ordinary day. One of the men, a local who had lived in the area all his life, was digging near the edge of the property, expected nothing more than rocks and soil. His shovel bit into the ground but then stopped abruptly with a sharp clunk. The sound was different from hitting stone hollow, almost muted. He pressed his boot against the blade and pushed harder, but the object wouldn't give. At first, he thought it might just be a large buried rock or a piece of old construction debris from years past. He bent down, scraping away at the dirt with his gloved hands. Slowly, a patch of color emerged from the brown soil pale, faded fabric frayed at the edges. He frowned. It wasn't the color of any tarp or work cloth he'd seen. Something about it made his stomach tighten. It didn't belong here, not buried in the earth like this. He brushed away more dirt, and the fabric spread into a larger shape. A zipper came into view, rusted and broken in places. His heart began to pound as realization struck this wasn't just fabric, it was a backpack. He froze. Memories flickered in his mind of news reports. The missing posters that had once been stapled to every pole in town, the faces of the three teenagers who had vanished 5 years ago. For a long moment, and silence. Inside, the first thing they pulled out was a phone case. It was covered in faded sticker stars, a small heart, and a cartoon fox. It was instantly recognizable to one of the mothers standing nearby. She had bought that case for her daughter's birthday, and she had seen it every day until the day she vanished. Her breath caught, her knees weakening, and someone reached out to steady her. Next came a hoodie. It was torn at the sleeve, the fabric worn from time and weather. in a new source of torment. Finally, there was proof, physical proof that their children had been here, somewhere near this spot. But it also meant they had been close all along, perhaps just out of reach, hidden beneath the ground as life above carried on. That night, none of the parents slept. The images of the phone case, the hoodie, and the bracelet kept replaying in their minds. They imagined the moment those items had last been in their children's hands. They wondered how they had ended up buried. They feared what else might be out there waiting to be found. The investigation was far from over. In fact, it had just begun again. But for the first time in 5 years, there was something tangible to hold on to, a thread in the darkness. And now, the question was whether pulling on that thread would finally unravel the truth, or reveal something even more terrifying. The discovery of the backpack lit a fire under the investigation like nothing else had in years. Forensic teams poured into the area, their white tents and evidence markers dotting the once quiet construction site. Day and night, they worked sifting through soil by hand, combing every inch with metal detectors, and scanning the surroundings for anything that might have been overlooked. The mountain air was filled with the hum of generators, the murmur of investigators speaking in low voices, and the steady clicking of camera shutters capturing every detail. Despite the rush of activity, the truth was that the backpack raised far more questions than it answered. It wasn't just about what was found, it was about why it was there, buried beneath the soil like a secret someone wanted to hide. The simple fact that it had been underground meant it didn't end up there naturally. Someone, at some point, had deliberately put it there. But who and when? The condition of the items was a mystery in itself. The fabric was weathered, but not completely destroyed. The phone case stickers were faded, but still visible. Forensic experts debated whether the backpack had been buried soon after the teens disappeared, or if it had been moved there at a later time. That difference could change the entire timeline of the case. If it had been placed there right after they vanished, it might suggest the site was directly connected to whatever had happened. If it had been moved later, it could mean someone had kept it hidden elsewhere for years before deciding to bury it here. And then there was the question that haunted everyone the most: where were the bodies? The soil around the backpack had been searched for human remains, but nothing was found. Cadaver dogs sniffed the entire area, yet they gave no indication of anything nearby. The idea that their belongings could be here without them was deeply unsettling. It left investigators and families grappling with grim possibilities. One theory was that the teens had been taken somewhere else, and the backpack had been discarded or buried as a way to remove evidence. Another was that they had met with an accident far from this spot. Someone, perhaps even a stranger, had found the items, and for reasons unknown, decided to hide them here. But there were darker theories too, ones no parent wanted to voice out loud. That they had been harmed intentionally. That the person responsible had stood in this very place, digging into the earth with the same calm determination that now haunted the family's imaginations. Investigators retraced every step of the original search, looking at old maps, drone footage, photographs from 2019. They questioned whether the site had been missed in the first search, or if there was a reason it hadn't been examined back then. Some officers were troubled by the fact that it wasn't far from the original trail, yet it had gone unnoticed for 5 long years. For the families, the discovery brought a bittersweet kind of closure. Finally, they had proof, undeniable, physical proof, that their children had been here, that their story hadn't simply evaporated into thin air. But that proof came without answers. It was like being given the corner piece of a puzzle without knowing what the full picture looked like. In their homes, the parents sat at kitchen tables late into the night, staring at photographs of the backpack and its contents. They touched the images on their phones as if, somehow, they could feel the fabric. They imagined their children wearing that hoodie, laughing with that bracelet on their wrist, texting on the phone in that sticker-covered case. Each object was like a whisper from the past, but it didn't speak the words they most longed to hear. Where are they now? The town's atmosphere shifted again. People who had learned to live with the silence now found themselves glancing at strangers in the grocery store, wondering if one of them knew more than they were saying. Rumors swirled, stories of suspicious hikers, unfamiliar cars spotted near the trail years ago, or locals who had moved away suddenly. Every piece of gossip was passed along in hushed tones, though most of it led nowhere. Even the investigators seemed caught between hope and frustration. They had something solid to work with now, but without the rest of the picture, it was like chasing shadows. Detectives revisited old witnesses, asking the same questions they had asked years ago, hoping that the passage of time might make someone more willing to talk. They even reached out to specialist profiler teams, forensic archaeologists, and search experts to see if a fresh perspective might uncover something new. But the mountains, beautiful and unyielding, kept their secrets. The trees swayed in the wind as they always had, the creeks kept running, and the trail remained as it had for decades. Nature gave nothing away. It was the same quiet defiance that had frustrated searchers back in 2019, and it still loomed over the case now. The families clung to hope, but it was a different kind of hope than before. It was no longer the bright, desperate belief that their children would come walking home. It was a quieter, heavier hope, the hope that they would one day know what happened, that they could put the pieces together and find some measure of peace. Late at night, each parent faced the same haunting thought. Someone out there knew the truth. Someone had been close enough to touch that backpack, to bury it, to walk away and never speak of it again. And that person was still out there, living their life while the families lived with an open wound. Even now, the case remains open. Detectives keep the file active, the evidence carefully preserved, waiting for the one piece that could break it open. The backpack sits in an evidence locker, tagged and sealed, a silent witness to something unspeakable. And somewhere in those mountains or far beyond them, the truth still hides just out of reach, like a shadow in the corner of your vision. For the town, the mystery is no longer just a story from the past. It is once again a living thing, breathing into their days and creeping into their nights. And for the families, the wait continues. Because until the day comes when the last question is answered, there will be no rest. Colorado's mountains rise like ancient guardians, their snow-tipped peaks glowing in the sunlight, their valleys lush with green in the spring. They are breathtaking, almost otherworldly in their beauty. People travel from across the country to hike here, to feel the crisp air on their skin, to lose themselves in the peace of nature. But those who live close to these mountains know a truth that visitors rarely consider. Beauty can hide danger, and sometimes it can hide secrets that no one will ever fully uncover. This case is one of those secrets. It's a reminder that no matter how many trails we map, no matter how many rescue teams we send into the wilderness, there are places that can swallow people whole and never give them back.
For 5 years, these families lived with a void in their hearts, wondering every single day what happened to their children. And even now, after the discovery of the backpack, they are still left with more questions than answers. If you try to imagine their lives, it's almost unbearable. Waking up each morning with the hope that maybe today will bring news, only to go to bed each night with nothing but silence. Celebrating birthdays with an empty chair. Walking past the trailhead and wondering if your child's footsteps had once echoed there for the last time. This is the reality they live with. The mountains don't speak! They don't tell you what happened in the shadows of their ridges, or in the quiet clearings where the sunlight filters through the pines. They keep their own counsel, and for the people left behind, that silence is the most painful sound of all. Some would say that after so many years, it's time to let go. But if you ask the parents, they will tell you there is no letting go. Not when there's even the smallest chance of finding the truth. They will keep searching, no matter how many years pass, because the love for their children doesn't fade with time. It only grows stronger, like a light they carry into the dark, refusing to let it go out. And maybe that's the part of this story that matters most, the resilience of the human heart. These mountains may be vast and untamed, but the love of a parent is just as powerful. It pushes them to keep going back, to keep asking questions, to keep looking under every rock and behind every tree. It is the one thing that can't be buried in the soil or erased by time. Still, the truth is out there somewhere. Maybe it lies hidden in a remote corner of the forest, waiting for the right eyes to find it. Maybe it lives inside the mind of someone who has kept silent for too long. Or maybe, heartbreakingly, it will remain beyond reach forever. But here's a question for you: if you were in their shoes, would you keep searching? Would you spend years chasing faint trails, rereading old police reports, combing the mountains for the smallest clue? Would you keep going back, even when everyone else told you to stop? It's not an easy answer. Because what happened to these teenagers isn't just a mystery, it's a warning. A reminder that even the most beautiful places can hold darkness in their depths. That not every story gets a neat ending. And that sometimes nature, it's places hide the darkest truths, and you deserve to hear them all.